I'm Ashton Stewart. I'm the manager of SAGEVets, which is a New York State program for older LGBT veterans. And I'm a combat veteran of the first Gulf War. And I am delighted to have the opportunity to be with you this evening and talk about these very important issues. We also have DA Katz, Melinda Katz, who's going to be joining us. And as soon as I get word that she is here, I would like her to share a few words about her work with the treatment program, and I'll give her the proper intro when she's ready. So one of the things that we wanted to focus on today, this month and this very day marks the 10-year anniversary since Congress passed the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which was signed on December 22nd, 2010, and implemented on February 28th, 1994. So during the first part of Make America United, we talked about the history of gay purges in the military that began in 1919 and lasted well through the 1980s. We do have a link to that we will share later. That program is archived, so if you do have interest in viewing that, you can certainly do so. Don't Ask, Don't Tell was one of the final policies that began with the gay purges of the federal employees, including the U.S. Armed Forces. And although its repeal was a significant step forward, the negative fallout caused by this policy continues to reverberate the veteran community to this day. Today, we are going to talk about those effects, the legislative legacy carried out by brilliant, compassionate attorneys, hear from veterans affected by this policy, and how SAGEVets is working with the New York State Division of Veterans Services to help overcome the negative fallout from Don't Ask, Don't Tell, with one veteran at a time. So later in the program, we're also going to hear from two veterans who received other than honorable discharges related to their sexual orientation. I'm just checking to see if the DA is ready. Let's see. Doesn't look like it. Okay, so one of those brilliant attorneys is with us today. Aaron Tax is the Director of Advocacy for SAGE. He advocates for unique needs of LGBT older adults. And until June 2011, Aaron served as the legal director at Service Members Legal Defense Network, SLDN is a better known acronym there, the leading organization challenging Don't Ask, Don't Tell in Congress and in the courts. As the legal director, Aaron was responsible for running the legal service program at SLDN, the only organization at the time providing free legal services to service members impacted by Don't Ask, Don't Tell and related forms of discrimination, including those who are HIV or transgender. Aaron, that history is significant in so many ways, and I would love to hear some of the story on how the court battles went and how this all came about.
Sure. So I see you have me down for 20 minutes on the agenda. Is this my 20 minutes or is this a briefer portion?
I think that you should go with it, and as soon as we have the DA, if you don't mind an interruption from the district attorney,
Yeah.
we will adjust.
Let's do it. All right, I'll keep my eyes on the clock and feel free to break in and whatever. So Don't Ask, Don't Tell. I think the first important, and I'm a little rusty here because I haven't done my little Don't Ask, Don't Tell spiel in a while. It's been about 9 years, but I think the first most important thing to note is the law, the colloquial name for the law, Don't Ask, Don't Tell, is very much a misnomer. There's nothing in the law itself about not asking, while in fact people were asked all the time, and the law thing most of the time, but it was rather haphazard, which is an important note too, with respect to law actually say and how did it, generally speaking, come about. As Ashton, you mentioned at the top, there was some form of administrative ban on LGBT people serving, and I purposely left out the T because that's a separate category in terms of the law, but LGBT people serving ever since World War administrative ban, which he could have done because again, it was purely administrative. But he had some baggage at the time concerning not serving in Vietnam. And apparently Sam Nunn also had a chip on his shoulder. And one thing led to another, and Congress pushed back. And they said, not only are you not going to administratively repeal this, but the administrative ban, but in fact, we're going to put a law into place. And it was seen sort of as a compromise at the time, because you just listen to the name, don't ask, don't tell. It sounds pretty innocuous. But in fact, like I said, it was rather unforgiving in many ways. So the law, it's a statute, or was a statute, 10 U.S.C. 654, had a whole bunch of implementing regulations. Each of the services had implementing regulations. The reserves had implementing regulations. The National Guard had implementing regulations. So it's easy to think it's just this casual kind of policy. But first you have a federal law, and then you have reams of paper about how it should be implemented. And it was implemented a little bit differently in each of the services. But what are the kind of common themes here? Because they're really not. I think most people think of conduct as some sort of act or touching someone. But the way that the law defined quote unquote homosexual conduct was rather broad. It included three things. Number one, don't tell anyone in your life ever that you're gay or words to that effect. That could be when you were in kindergarten. It could be with your spouse. It could be with your boyfriend or girlfriend. It could be with your parents. It could be on Facebook. It could be on Twitter. Anywhere in your life ever at any time, even before you join the military. I think that's an important thing to note, because I think most people hear about it. They're like, oh, just don't go to work and tell your coworkers or people serving with you in the military, about your sex life. And any, no straight people are going to go to work and tell people about their sex life. So this isn't a big deal. But it really means do not tell anyone in your life ever that you're gay, because they could out you. And there's really nothing you could do about that. Secondly, don't touch anyone for sexual gratification. That's the second thing. Those are the no touching part of this. The last year I was working on this issue, we had 2 investigations for people hugging. So it really kind of shows you, it really means no touching of anyone at all for sexual gratification. I know people might quibble whether hugging is for sexual gratification, but that goes to like how kind of crazy, this law was. The third factor was marriage or attempted marriage to someone of the same as people of the same sex being allowed to marry. But the Congress was extremely thorough and wanted to plan ahead and said no one could marry or attempt to marry someone of the same sex. So that these are the 3 things that would get you in trouble under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And like I said at the top, the law was very arbitrarily enforced and very unforgiving sometimes in how it was enforced. So we worked with clients who were out, so like everyone and their mother in their unit, no one cared, they got promoted, everything was fine. And then at any single moment, the shoe could drop because someone had a beef with them, and someone in a higher up chain of command could have a beef knowing that there was someone serving openly, and the discharge process would begin. So you just kind of played Russian roulette if you did come out. So you'll hear some people say like, oh, it wasn't a big deal. I was able to serve for 20 years, whoop-de-doo. But in fact, it was actually a big problem because you just really didn't know when the shoe would drop. You have other people that tried their best to stay closeted through really trying times, and they were kicked out on a dime. And you look at those folks, then you look at these other people who are out to like tons of people, and you look at the arbitrariness of this, and it was just really heart-wrenching. And just to kind of give you a feel of the types of cases we had, and to show you why I was so frustrated when the late John McCain said he thought the law worked really well, and other members of Congress thought the law worked really well. Colin Powell thought the law worked really well. Not that I have a chip on my shoulder about any of these folks. I'll share some anecdotes. And some of these are.
Before we get to the anecdotes, let me just interrupt. I apologize, but DA Melinda Katz has joined us, and I want to definitely take advantage of her time. We're so honored to have Ms. Katz here. Elected in November 2019, Melinda Katz is the first woman to serve as Queens County District Attorney in the city of New York. She was elected in 1994 to serve in the New York State Assembly, where she wrote and passed crucial legislation to protect New York's most vulnerable. Melinda Katz says that she's acutely aware that her children sleep safely at night because of the services of our veterans. Ms. Katz, the current DA of Queens, said her job as DA will include making sure that veterans know how much they are valued and addressing the unique issues they face. She works very intensively with the Veterans Treatment Court program, which connects military veterans charged with certain misdemeanors to supportive services, including substance use treatment and mental health care. So without further ado, we're going to hear from Melinda Katz to hear a little bit more about that.
Hold on, I'm working on this modern technology. Hold on. How are we? Can you hear me now?
Perfect. You're perfect.
I'm
yes, we can
perfect.
see you too. You're a little dark, but we can see you.
I've been waiting to hear I was perfect my whole life. I want to thank SAGEVets for putting this together. I'm going to try to brighten my face up. How's that? Chris, can you help me by just, thank you so much. It just went off. If you have another flashlight, that'd be great. I apologize. I want to thank SAGEVets for doing all that they do to get the information out on Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and everything they're trying to educate folks on, and getting honorable discharges for those that were dishonorably discharged. Forum, private forum, however you'd like. I would love to be a part of that movement. It is important to me. My kids and I talk about veterans so often, and I bring them to all of the events. We do a veterans event and a Memorial Day event, and I bring them to the event and I explain to them how they go to sleep at night because of the sacrifices that the men and women made of this country. Whoever they loved, whatever country they were from, the sacrifices were enormous, and that's the reason that we are safe and sound. So SAGEVets, thank you for pulling this together. I want to thank Ashton and Kristen for the work that they do. I've been the DA now for 11 months. It has been an amazing time. For 9.5 of those months, I've lived through COVID while being the district attorney. So the bail laws changed twice. The discovery laws changed twice. I got rid of a awful policy of the DA's office, which forced you to waive your grand jury rights in order to get a plea at the top. And it was very policy in this office. I got rid of it on January 1st. So bail laws, discovery laws, the policy, we had a national conversation and unrest because of the murder of George Floyd. And because we stand on the shoulders of those generations that were fighting for a fair criminal justice system before us. And at the same time, we had a worldwide pandemic. So it's been a fascinating first 11.5 months as being the district attorney. We've gone virtual, we went non-virtual, and now we're going virtual again as we rise in numbers of COVID. But in the meantime, life still goes on. We had a veterans event. We honored those men and women, not only from outside the office, who served in World War II, the Vietnam War, one was from Afghanistan War, and someone from inside my own shop, who is an ADA, who was in the Coast Guard, I believe it was. And then we honored each and every single one of my ADAs who also served and said their name during the event. I'm also the first DA, by the way, who had a banner, huge banner in the Gay Pride Parade in Queens County. And I had so many of my ADAs that came with me who got to express themselves. I was just so thrilled to be there as the DA and show how important it was that we are there for everyone in this county. You mentioned a few things. Let me just, if I can, I know there's the speaker who, by the way, I was fascinated by his information, and I thank him for being, for educating me on a lot of it. But very quickly, shootings have gone up in this borough. We developed a Violent Criminal Enterprise Bureau. I'd like to call it the Guns, Gangs, and Drugs Bureau, but I was outvoted in the name that I chose. But we are taking down people who are bringing guns from the South. They're buying them legally in the South. They're bringing them up the iron pipeline, and they're selling them to our children in Queens County. And we've brought down the gun traffickers But at the same time, we want to work with our youth to make sure that they're not picking up the same guns that people are going to jail for. So we are putting out an RFP, and I hope that the LGBTQ community is part of that RFP to help our youth. Mentorship programs, workforce development programs, showing the youth the better path, better trails. And I'll make sure that you are on that list if I can, so that you can send it out to your members and they can actually be part of the bidding. Veterans Court. I have made it my goal, and I think we are there, that you don't have to plead guilty to get to Veterans Court. I mean, part of the problem with Veterans Court before I came here was that in order to get into the treatment part, you had to plead guilty to whatever crime, and then you could get a diversion program for treatment. My goal, and I think we're about 9/10 there, is that you don't have to plead guilty to get into the diversion court. That you get dismissal, you get the treatment you need, you get the help you need because you served our country, and you deserve at the bare minimum a chance to be able to have the government help in whatever way you need it, whether it's drug abuse or mental health or job creation or whatever that is. So the veterans courts are going through a change as well. At the same time, I created a hate crimes bureau. That used to be in conjunction with gangs. I didn't quite understand that connection. I made it my own. So anyone who is a victim of a hate crime, victim because of the nationality, because of the religion, because of who they choose to love, anything like that, we are there. I have a hate crime bureau chief, Michael Brovner. He is available to you at any time. And what else did I want to tell you? Oh, we did our Veterans and Memorial Day events. We were actually at the Vietnam Veteran Memorial that, as many of you know on this call, I have spent 10 years trying to get. It has the names of all the Vietnam veterans who were killed in action and or those that died after because of injuries or because of disease. We have a Vietnam veterans in Elmhurst Park, Keyspan Park, which we were proud enough to do our events there. So look, I wanted to come on the call because I am so proud of the relationship that I have formed with the community over the years, between the LGBT clubs, the PFLAG that I was a member of for many, many years. I have been a elected official for almost 30 years now, on and off, which is hard to believe. And anything I can be useful for, I would like to be useful for. Any fights that we're having, I want to be on your side. And it's important to me that you know that my office, which is an office that historically people might have shied away from, we want you to be involved in what we're doing. By the way, we also are going to have a Veterans Advisory Council. I would love to have representation from your community on that, from either SAGEVets or any of the community there. So let me know. And if you have a question, I'd be happy to answer it.
Thank you so much, DA Katz. Thank you for all your steadfast commitment to veterans, the youth, and the constituents of Queens. And yes, we are definitely game for participating in the advisory committee. Thank you so much for taking time today to share some of your great work. And the treatment courts program is amazing, and it started in Buffalo, New York. So keep doing it. Keep doing that great stuff. Despite all these challenges, you keep rocking it. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Katz@queensda.org goes right to my.
We will definitely put that in the
Goodbye
chat.
To 2020.
Okay. Yes.
Goodbye to 2020.
Here.
I'm done. But Happy New Year to everybody, and you should be healthy and safe. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Katz.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Happy New Year to you as well.
You tell Dirk McCall is on here too. Call him also.
Okay.
We love Dirk. I stole him from the Bronx. Ruben Diaz Jr. didn't want him to go.
I'm sure they didn't.
Everyone.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Aaron, thank you so much for your patience on that. Let's hear those anecdotes.
All right, here we go. So we heard from people in 3 different, actually before I begin, how long should I go for now? Like 10 more minutes, or do you want me to cut it short? Because I can go for as long as you want.
I think you go when you feel it's comfortable. Maybe 8 minutes. How's that?
Okay, just cut me off, but I'll watch the clock. So we heard from three people in three different categories, I would say, at SLDN. So number one, people who wanted to come out, quote unquote, voluntarily. I'll note that in many cases, it wasn't really voluntary in the sense that people were just simply tired of having to lie day in and day out about the fundamentals of who they are, having to make up either fictional stories or just not get to know anyone or not to speak to anybody. And I'll give you a story that illustrates that. So we help people with that process discuss the implications of it, how it might impact their GI Bill, what their DD-214 would say, so on and so forth. Number two, people who had questions about the law and how it worked. A shocking number of people who were serving in the military didn't even really understand Don't Ask, Don't Tell, in part because it was so complicated. So, you know, we heard questions like, can I hang up a rainbow flag in my room in the barracks? Can I get a tattoo that indicates I'm gay in some way? Can I go to an Indigo Girls concert for real? I mean, I'll show you how crazy it is. I'll just say it. I had an intern project, or I gave a project to our intern because we had a client who had an STI, which you could probably only get through sex with another guy. And I had her research this, like, how can you get this thing? And can this guy go to the doctor and get it checked out? Or is that going to be a statement under Don't Ask, Don't Tell? So there's a million different iterations in which it would come up, and I'll give you some stories that illustrate that too. And then the final category is people who are under investigation or thought they were under investigation, and we gave them tips about how to handle that and what to say and what not to say. And generally the rule was don't say anything because it could be used against you. So what are some examples of the challenges that some people have? A number of these stories are from our constitutional challenge to Don't Ask, Don't Tell called Cook v. Gates, where we had a number of plaintiffs with what I would think are very compelling stories that illustrated how harsh the law was. And one of them, the named plaintiff, Tommy Cook, came out to some people in his unit, or they found out he was gay. And actually, no, let me rewind that a second. He heard his kind of like platoon leader or something to that effect say, if I found out that anyone in my unit was gay, I would kill them. And they were getting ready to deploy overseas. So Tommy was not out at that point, but was really afraid. And he reported this up the chain of command saying, hey, I'm a gay guy. And this person above me in the chain of command just said this, like, if I found out anyone is gay in the unit, I would kill them. And I'm a little bit concerned. And what happened to Tommy? Tommy got discharged because he told under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, getting to the, how unforgiving the law was. We had another client who went to medical school on the Air Force and was getting ready to be assigned to her first duty station, and found out that the time that her wife had cancer and didn't really have very long, to live, or probably not wife at that time, but partner. And, did everything in her power not to share with the command why she couldn't really move at that time, because her partner at the time wanted to get treatment in the hospital in the small town where they lived and where they knew the doctors and whatnot. And ultimately, realized that, the only way to explain to them what was going on was to explain what was happening with her partner. And she came out and told them, I can't move because my partner can't move right now. And what happened to her? She got discharged under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and they recouped the entire cost of her medical school education because she had, quote unquote, voluntarily told under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. We had another client, and I believe she was a plaintiff too. And she also testified at the Senate Armed Services Committee about her experience under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. She was someone who went to the Naval Academy and decided from day one that she was going to be honest, that she did not have it in her to lie day in and day out. And she'd be honest about who she was. And if people asked her, she just told the truth. And one of the things that she shared at the hearing was, the Academy's honor code and how she really took that to heart about not lying and being honest. And she told a story of how powerful and important it was, to be out, and why it was important for establishing trust and to get to know the people with whom she served. And one day she was on the ship, and someone came up to her, and all he said is, I just want to let you know that my son is gay. And that was it. He just wanted to share that little anecdote with her because he knew, she was someone who was out. and it meant a lot to him to see someone serving that way. And he just wanted to share that anecdote with her. And these are the types of relationships, conversations that were precluded by Don't Ask, Don't Tell, where people could not get to know the people they were serving with, which is ironic because people like John McCain and Colin Powell and others who defended the law talked about the necessity of the law to preserve good order, morale, good order, and discipline and whatnot. And in fact, it totally undercut those things because people could not get to know the people with whom they were serving and were forced to lie to them day in and day out. So, these are the things that motivated me to, provide the legal services to folks and to advocate for repeal. And, there were so many cases where, Don't Ask, Don't Tell was used as a form of blackmail. I remember one of my first clients was forced into a sexual relationship with a civilian doctor because the civilian doctor said, I know you're in the military and I want you to have sex with me. And if you don't, I'm going to out you. And really, there was nothing people could do in those scenarios because there was nothing illegal about outing someone, but there was everything that was illegal about being out in the military. And as a result, people could lose, not only, it's not just a job for folks, and you'll hear more about that on the other folks on the webinar today. But it's, it's a whole way of life. It could be a family tradition. It could be your means of going to college. It's the roof over your head, your opportunity to go to college, all these things. And it could just be taken away from you in an instant. So I think that kind of gives you a feel for, some of the, challenges that, these folks were facing. And I'm looking at my notes here to see if I want to point out anything else. There was about 17,000 people who were kicked out under Don't Ask, Don't Tell at the end of the day. And, many of them, we'll never hear about, we'll never know their stories. But on top of that, I think it's important not to just focus on that 17,000 number, but think about all the people whose lives were impacted by this, people who are in the military, family members of people who are in the military who were, completely silenced by the law, people who did not, re-enlist or stay in the military because of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. At the time, Arabic linguists were very important, and we had reports on all the Arab linguists, who were being kicked out and putting our country in danger because of the law. And I remember one campaign that we had, which I think, kind of link back to today, and the obligation we have to hold the Biden administration accountable for improving the lives of LGBT older folks and others, is we were pushing Obama to move forward on repeal. And yes, he was a strong advocate for the LGBT community, but at the same time, we also had to push him to move things along. And we had a letter writing campaign where we had one letter a day to Obama about the challenges that LGBT service members were facing and their families. And one of the people who wanted to write the letter was a mother of someone who was impacted, or who was still in the military, was being impacted by Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And we had to caution her that she couldn't use her real name, because if she talked about her son being in the military, she would put his career at risk, because then she would be inherently outing her own son. So she wrote the letter anonymously. And, we had another letter from a Marine who was serving in the closet, and he wrote about, the first guy he fell in love with and what it was like, to serve in the military under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And he wrote that letter anonymously too. Thankfully, he's still serving in the Marines and still with the same boyfriend, now husband. But, it just like impacted people in so many horrible, horrible ways. And I think, you think about the importance of messaging and communications, and, the name of the law was just so misleading, and it just sounded so innocuous when, by working on this issue, I saw how many people's lives it really destroyed each and every day. And it's just really sad to think about it. And at the same time, there are people who are, survivors in many ways and struggle through it, and really sacrifice so much to serve our country by serving in the closet, or at least having this threat hanging over their head day in and day out. And the final thing I was thinking about is, in the process of repeal, the military really bent over backwards to kind of listen to the military, hear them out, and try to defer to the military, and went so far as to say, okay, we'll do a survey of all the troops serving under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and we'll see what they think about repeal, which is kind of ridiculous, because why should we really care about what people, if people think we should continue discriminating against, folks in the military, but yet they decided to move forward with that. And we were in conversations with the DoD General Counsel at the time, because we said, well, LGBT service members can't participate in the survey and be honest, because they'll be outed. How could they be honest and say, I'm a gay person serving in the military and don't ask, don't tell is horrible? And we asked them if they could, have some sort of carve out for LGBT service members, and they said no. So, given our duty as primarily a legal services organization, we recommended that no, LGBT service members participate in the survey. And I remember again, like in Congress when they were, debating repeal, and they were talking about the survey, you had members of Congress who, like, a light bulb went off in their head when we were talking about, well, we can't even talk to, LGBT service members about this and hear about their experiences because we're putting their careers at risk. And a little light bulb went off in their head, like, oh, that's a form of telling. And it was so frustrating to hear this and hear members of Congress debate the law and the merits of the law, understanding that most of them, I would venture to say, didn't even understand how it worked. And yet many of them were out there defending it. And I think that was the time I became probably most cynical about lawmakers in Washington, D.C. So maybe I'll stop there with the cynicism and turn it over to our other guests.
Thank you so much, Aaron. Amazing presentation. The history and the stories are shocking. We're going to continue to share those kinds of stories, and we're also going to share some good news with the outcome. Not only did Don't Ask, Don't Tell end, but New York State has taken a very active leadership role with legislation. SAGE was very involved with the formation of this legislation. It's incredibly inclusive. It's called the Restoration of Honor Act, and the New York State Division of Veterans Services is overseeing the process. And without further ado, Kristen, would you like to share a little bit about the Restoration of Honor Act?
Sure, Ashton, I'd be glad to do that. And, and again, thank you for partnering on this event, and thank you, Aaron, for all the work that you've done. So 17 of my years in service, to include my first 10 years in the Army Reserve, 3 active duty years when I was regular Army at Fort Drum, and then some of my years in the National Guard. 17 years total were under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And I remember in the 90s, following, this was before, I want to say like before the internet. I don't know if that's really true. It was before I was on the internet. And I know that I was like avidly getting SLDN mailings, and looking for news of like, what's going on with this Don't Ask, Don't Tell thing. Like I signed up in the military. I thought this was a compromise. This seemed to be a good idea at the time. I didn't have to lie about who I was in order to serve in the military, and I could serve proudly. I could, all of this stuff. It seemed okay until I realized it really wasn't. And so SLDN was really the only organization there for us for so long, doing the good work of letting reservists like me know what was I accountable for? What, how should I act right to protect myself? And if that day came when somebody chose to investigate me or ask questions or whatever, like I knew who to call. SLDN was putting out, here are your rights, and I can't tell you how important SLDN was. During those years when there just wasn't clear guidance, nobody seemed to understand it except the people who still wanted to serve, despite the limitations. And it was, and even as like I think it was like 1999 when Barry Winchell was murdered by his fellow soldiers at Fort Campbell, and I was 5 years in. I'd been promoted to sergeant. I thought, this was a great thing in my life. And I was, in a unit that very fortunately for me was pretty accepting. It was in New Orleans, which was a pretty, in an urban environment, people are much more likely to be accepting. But, or to have family members or otherwise, have some kind of cultural competency. But 5 years in and realizing just how deadly and violent and terrible the military culture can be for people who are non-conforming, for people who are LGBT, for women, for so many people. And Barry Winchell, was dating a trans woman. He was a male dating a trans woman, and that's what spurred his comrades to do grave, fatal violence against him. And there's so many stories, and I know so many of you on the call have so many stories, and just today reflecting on like what are the last 10 years since repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell mean? And I feel like today, because this isn't a happy occasion. We're not celebrating. We're not lighting candles on a cake here. It's really in many ways a commemoration because so many people are still contending with so much pain and harm and so much that was taken from them. And 10 years on, we still have so much more to do to make things right for people. We still have yet to hear an apology. Has anybody ever said to you? Has anybody ever said to each of you on here who've been impacted by Don't Ask, Don't Tell and the terrible policies that preceded it? Has anybody ever said, "We're so sorry. We're so sorry for the pain caused to you"? I am somebody who was affected by Don't Ask, Don't Tell, even though I'm one of the lucky ones who still stayed in. I was still harmed by it. I was not the most harmed, but I still feel harmed from it. And that gives me a taste of what so many other people are living with and still feel and still have the scars from these policies. But I am here on behalf of New York State to say that we are sorry. We are sorry that you endured what you did. We are sorry that you were targeted for discrimination, for an identity that should never be targeted for any negative consequence in any way. And we still have so much more to do as a state, and we still have so much more to do as a country to make things right. And we are working on it. So, that said, we are proudly implementing the Restoration of Honor Act, which is a New York State law that it does not provide the federal discharge upgrade that still needs to come for everybody who was wrongfully discharged under anti-LGBT policies. That sweeping action still has yet to come, although folks are having much more success in recent years than in the more distant past. But so we do want to refer you to those resources where folks can help you fight for that discharge upgrade. It is still a years-long and arduous process, and that ship still needs to get righted. But something we are doing here in New York State is we are looking at your case based on the application and information that you provide to us. If we can see that your bad paper discharge, whether it was a general discharge, an other than honorable discharge, those are the two we're primarily able to focus on with this law. So if you have an administrative discharge, then that we can connect through narrative, through some kind of evidence that you can provide to us. If we can see that it was based in discrimination based on your sexual orientation or your gender identity, or on misunderstood, misdiagnosed, mistreated, post-traumatic stress disorder, military sexual trauma, to include sexual assault, or a profound climate of sexual harassment, that culture, that toxic culture that we're talking about. If you can show us that it was related to a misdiagnosed, mistreated, misunderstood traumatic brain injury, and the behavior that cascaded from there. If you can show us that, if we can work with you to see that that's what your case, what your bad paper discharge was related to, then we will walk with you, we will work with you, we will go back and forth with you to get that full story from you and to understand what happened. And we will help you to put the evidence together. We will help you get your military records if you're missing them. We'll work with you to put that all together. And what we do is in-house at the Division of Veteran Services. It stays in-house. This case doesn't go anywhere other than internally. Our appellate unit looks at it and works with you, puts it all together. And then once all of those criteria are met, then our executive deputy director can sign off on paperwork from New York State, essentially saying, we realize what happened. This is based on an injustice, and your service for New York State purposes is deemed honorable. And so we've been able to do that with, I believe we're over more than a dozen right now. We issued our first determinations the day after Veterans Day of this year. That was the first day that we were allowed to do that by law. So on November 12th, we issued our first rulings, and we have several more cases working through the process. And so what you can do is we've done training statewide, all of our state agencies, so that you can take that piece of paper, you can take it to the DMV and get veteran put on your license. You can go, you can go to the different respective agencies governing more than 50 state benefits that you would become eligible for. And again, it's based on your time in service, and we still have all these requirements for New York State benefits and services. But if your bad paper discharge is holding you back, this piece of paper will restore that for New York State purposes. And we also want to make sure that you are connected with the folks who can help you with the federal upgrade.
This is model legislation, and
yeah.
Kudos to the State Division for handling this. It's so powerful, and there's only 2 other states that have similar legislation, Connecticut and Rhode Island. So it's a model for the nation. And not only that, the VA just came out with a newsletter like 2 weeks ago, and they were talking about discharge upgrades for other than honorable discharges. And they had a little note saying, exactly like the Restoration of Honor Act, if you are discharged for SOGI, sexual orientation, gender identity, TBI, MST, or PTSD, your application will be considered by all branches of the military as more serious, and they will be given a priority. Did they get that information from the Restoration of Honor Act? Were they inspired? Perhaps. I would like to think they were. And so we want to see this really have an effect with other states and put more pressure on the federal government to make the change at that level. And we have a veteran here today. I think his technical difficulties have passed. I'm just going to go with it, and we're going to see what happens. But he was one of the first applicants for the Restoration of Honor Act. He came to SAGEVets a few months ago. And just to tell you a little bit about him, he's a 63-year-old Black cisgender gay veteran of the US Navy. While serving, he repeatedly received perfect performance evaluations, earned Sailor of the Month several times, and was nominated for Sailor of the Year by the commanding officers at his base. Despite his exemplary service, a disgruntled sailor reported suspicion that Lewis was gay. And after a subsequent investigation, he was discharged with an other than honorable discharge. And he came to us and he's like, I heard of the Restoration of Honor Act and I want my honor back. And that was his first statement to me. And I'm like, wow, you got it. I'm going to help you. I'm going to connect you to DVS. We're going to figure out what else we can do for you. It's very inspiring. And this is years ago that this happened. And he was awarded the honor to get back his honor. And I hope he's there. Lewis, are you here? Oh, he's had some technical difficulties. We're going to see if we can sort those out and give him a couple of seconds here. But we also had a question come in. It's a bit of a long-winded one, but it's because the person who wrote it, his name is Evan Simone. He's a brilliant brain, and he just did this huge study comparing VBA benefits claims versus discrimination experienced during service. And it's so, the study it would blow your mind. And his question is for Aaron. His understanding, he says, is that the repeal standards for the discharge review boards versus the boards of correction are different. That is, the discharge review board is supposed to upgrade if the decision was based on sexual orientation alone. However, the boards of correction are supposed to keep the discharge status unless some type of error could be demonstrated. The statute of limitations for DRBs is 15 years from the date of discharge. He believes that this suggests that we should identify don't ask, don't tell discharges that occurred within the last 15 years to improve a veteran's chances of getting a discharge upgrade. He wants to know your thoughts on that.
I'll be honest, I really don't know veterans kind of law or processes almost at all, because our goal at SLDN was to keep people in the military if they wanted to stay in and kind of help them with that process while serving under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And once they were out, that went to somebody else to help them. But the one thing I will say is we did help put people in touch with pro bono law firms who help people with the BCMRs, Boards of Corrections for Military Records, and they were able to help with upgrades, but I couldn't tell you, about the nuances between the DRBs and the BCMR kind of processes, unfortunately. But other people on the call might know more about it.
Thank you, Aaron. We'll keep watching our chat and see what comes about. So while we're waiting to see if Mr. Miller can get his audio on, you there, sir? Okay, we will carry on. There's another amazing story here from another soldier with so much spirit and fight and commitment to his country and to himself and to other veterans. Remarkable individual. And just to give you a little background on him, after serving as an officer in the US Army for 13 years, Mr. Pinkella was court-martialed and convicted on his 45th birthday and incarcerated at Fort Leavenworth for 272 days unjustly. 4 years later, he was issued an other than honorable discharge that ended his military career. Aside from the incredible trauma Mr. Pinkella has endured, a discharge stays with you forever, and veterans with an honorable discharge, a less than honorable discharge, are considered a burden to society. And this type of discharge is such an obstacle for employment that it requires, for anything that requires a security clearance and senior positions. And it actually happened to Mr. Pinkella. And he has been fighting tooth and nail to get this overturned, to get his full retirement instated. And also, he's got a criminal case going on because it's just a crazy story. It was written about in Rolling Stone magazine in 2017. I'll put a link to that in the chat and here in a second. But without further ado, Mr. Kenneth Pinkella, would you like to share some of your thoughts here on this program tonight and Don't Ask, Don't Tell?
Sure. Hi, Ashton. And just great. Chris, I've only met you a few times. It's really good to see your face. And of course, Aaron, we had a few little run-ins long time ago, and great friends like David McKean, who were some of the first people that I approached, because SLDN was that unique only place to go and feel safe that you could talk and get help. So Kristen and Aaron and even Ashton, you alluded to some of the terrible things that it is through these storytelling projects and issues like this, and people like the DA coming on that need to hear our life lived experience. And there are just so many things. One of the things I really want to capture were the behind the things pieces that Kristen alluded to, that we've heard other soldiers. I came in 87. So, and not 13 years, 29 years. So May of 87 to May of 2016. So when I came in, it was illegal, of course, to join. And you live through that. But I was also very privileged in my my rank progression and in my jobs. I was supporting the social office in the White House. You know, I had mentors like David Mixner. I had great social friends like Aubrey Sarvis. I mean, I had some just great, great older gay men and women in the DC area that I could lean on and learn. And yet it still didn't preclude me from making decisions that were for the Army and not for my life, not for my love. I have, you know, two dichotomy stories we're not going to have time for, but the one overarching is that we were never allowed to live free and open. Um, and when I was moving to DC, I'd just been selected to be the legislative liaison to the House of Representatives and had an incredible boyfriend at the time. And of course, behind the scenes, hidden, couldn't say that word to my family and friends, or excuse me, my friends within the Army. And he was willing to leave. He was a pretty predominant newscaster in Virginia Beach, was going to move to CNN in DC. And I made the decision because I was so afraid to be outed. And I look back now at that, you know, and you could use the word regret, but it was that overarching, you always had to think about it. The military, and Aaron, you're so articulate the way you explain that. Don't ask, don't tell, you know, I felt like I was sold out, but but how messed up it was that there are commanders like me that possibly didn't know what everything was, and it allowed other really bad commanders with their life prejudice, their life biases, to still go after soldiers when they found out. Remember, UCMJ, the Uniform Code of Military Justice, is not a justice system. It is, by definition and doctrine, a good order and conduct tool for military commanders to maintain that conduct and environment for them to have a successful military mission. So, I mean, that's the jargon, but that is the truth, that we didn't have the protections that Don't Ask, Don't Tell was perceived to have. I will tell you, I think it even allowed for some extra witch hunting to happen, and have many of those stories living in Hawaii at a time with a boyfriend when the most ruthless of witch hunts were going on by the commander at Hickam Air Force Base, literally putting out CID agents undercover in the gay bars. And at the time, with the big old gay bar of Hula's was still under the old banyan tree. And we were lucky. The gay owners knew us. They would come find us and say, hey, there's somebody in here. I mean, these people were in there literally almost dragging kids out when they would get them to hit on them, you know, and we would try to intervene. And those were the things that we shouldn't have had to have done, that our straight counterparts didn't have to do. You didn't have to lie about what you did on the weekend. You didn't have to lie about the love of your life. You didn't have to make career decisions. You know, those are my memories of, sadly, coming into a service, dedicating my life to the nation, like so many of us did. And then I was still happy my job, but I couldn't live. And then you learned how to lie, and you had to justify in your mind that lying was okay. And it literally, the traumas from that just sometimes led to trouble or just really broke you down. So, Kirsten, I'm so glad you said that. This is not a cake lighting event. This is a memorial to remember what they did to us, and to capture these stories so that, damn it, it doesn't happen again. So I really, you know, I know we're running out of time there. I don't know if there's other questions you want to lean on, but those are my memories. And then my story set, you know, people can capture that I will not stop fighting. They came at me sideways, but they came at me because of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. I'm allowed to say this, and I say it sadly, it was true. They wanted that last faggot out of the building. They didn't know about everybody else who was in the building, but they knew about me, and they came at me sideways, and then they came at me right on. I happen to be living with HIV. We're allowed to live and serve with HIV, but it was that summer of 2012 when they knew it was going to go away in December was the official, you know, end date. They still came after a bunch of us. So, you know, I love the Army. I will still tell people about joining the Army, but I still tell them stories. They've got to be careful. The networks of gay men and women are tight. We will watch out for you. And it's great organizations like you've heard about here, in the work like people like Kristen's doing. It's just so amazing. And Ashton, you know, what you're doing for me, but what you're doing here and all the organizations. And Aaron, you know, your name will be remembered really well in history of what you did for us. truly. So we'll just leave it there.
That's awesome, Ken. Aaron, you may want to respond to that.
I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me. And yeah, it's funny. I heard from someone who I helped out, God, like 10, 12, many years ago, recently over email, and just to say thanks. And yeah, it really means a lot to me. So I appreciate that. And the other thing I think about is, I was really honored to help out people serving in the military. I didn't serve myself, but I found the work, really, really meaningful, and it felt good to be able to make a difference.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Aaron too, Ken. And when I found out his history, I'm like, oh my God, what an honor. And let me get you in a program, and to share some of this history. And I mean, what leadership. And you were in a film that was about the whole process, and you are historic.
For about,
so it's just an honor.
about 1 second.
Hey, no, it was a lot
cameo.
longer than that. It was a lot longer than that. And it just goes to show that you've made a remarkable impact, and you continue to do so, advocating for the rights of LGBT elders through SAGE. And so remarkable stuff here. I believe that we are still trying to get Mr. Lewis here. And let me just put the word out there. Jess, did you have any luck with that? Is he on the line?
No, unfortunately, we weren't able to get him connected.
Okay, very unfortunate. I'm sorry to hear that. We'll keep trying. So the Restoration of Honor Act is a huge opportunity here. Kristen mentioned earlier the number of people who have so far applied. It is hovering around the 20 number. It was signed formally by Governor Cuomo on November 12th, so it is still brand spanking new, but we really need help on getting the word out there. It's all well and good to talk about these things in the veteran space and doing veteran programs like this, but the people who are most effective and most in need of this legislation aren't coming to veteran groups because they don't identify as veterans. So we really need to make sure that we have access to the language here, the Restoration of Honor, give them the access and share it far and wide as much as possible. SAGEVets, that's our mission, is to help out veterans who are older, 50 years and older, all in New York State. We help out with everything from legal services and legal referrals to mental health referrals, housing referrals, pension, disability compensation, you name it. There are so many programs and people wanting to help and offer assistance to veterans. And now it's more useful than it's ever been before. The pandemic, isolation, everything that's going on in all of our lives. We all know a veteran who could use a helping hand. We see him outside on the street. We hear about him in our family and our circles. So this is the time to really put the word out there and come together, make America united. That's what it's all about. It's the United States. We're here for each other, and it doesn't matter what your background is. So the partnership that we have with DVS, with Kristen and Benjamin, who is a wonderful attorney at DVS, who's given me so much counsel and helped me get through a lot of tough times when I can't find an attorney because the case hasn't really developed enough. And he'll say, oh yeah, I know about that. I know about this. Just do this and do that. Here's the form. I'll help you out. He's brilliant. And so we've been able to sustain ourselves. And during the pandemic, especially, it's been really hard because a lot of the service providers aren't able to function as they used to. Even the VA is struggling. The home-based primary care program is just sort of not happening. And a lot of the veterans that we work with are older and homebound, and they can't get to the VA. So it was a wonderful program before everything hit. So we're continuing to do everything we can to connect people to services and work with our partners. So anything that you can do to help support that is valued. We are still taking questions. If anybody has any questions for our panel or for our veterans, anybody, anything going on. Here's one right now. How can someone who is honorably discharged for being homosexual and bisexual with just under 2 consecutive years get their full veteran healthcare benefits? That is a hell of a
yeah,
question.
this is something that comes up a lot. I mean, so not only were folks under Don't Ask, Don't Tell or under prior exclusionary policies, not only were they put out on bad paper, they were just put out before at initial entry, or they were put out before that 2-year mark. And come to find out that so I don't, for anybody who's a fan of the series Pose, that the actress Angelica Ross, who played Candy in that series, which is great. Anyway, if we want to have a separate event just to talk about Pose as a series, I'd be glad to talk about that. But Angelica Ross, who's one of the actresses, was also a Navy veteran. And she did an online broadcast. You can on Facebook. You can look it up. Again, the name is Angelica Ross, talking about her experience under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and she tells her story where she was in the Navy as a I guess joined at 17. Was like maybe 18 years old, 17, 18 years old in the Navy on a ship, and as at that time, a cisgender man, and was just basically harassed, and at one point was just faced a very violent situation where shipmates were trying to coerce her into saying whether she was gay or not, when the reality was that she was transgender. But she was a kid; she didn't know. But she knew that she was under absolute duress, and she was put out under what she called a girl you don't get no benefits discharge, which was under that 2-year mark. I think it was under 100 days, if I remember correctly. But so it's basically folks were put out for basically like sort of a failure to adapt to an extremely hostile and toxic environment. That where they were facing a unit or ship or whatever climate of just extreme harassment and even violence. And I know that many of you on that call also face similar circumstances. And so you were put out right before you're eligible for those veterans benefits. So we're seeing that as a pattern. We want to be in touch with you. We don't know what we can change. With some folks, it's very case by case dependent, but there has been some measure of success where VA where DOD will literally add time in service for extreme cases of injustice, so that somebody does meet that eligibility mark. They're few and far between. They're case by case. But this is also something that when we're talking about what does justice look like for everybody who has done wrong, because it's not just the bad paper. Let's say there's a blanket, imagine a world where there is some kind of blanket upgrade for bad paper discharges due to LGBTQ exclusion. That's difficult to do with so many different circumstances. Because a lot of times there's so many other issues that were wrapped up into it, right? But with issues where you're not eligible for services due to that time in service, it's really it's worth fighting case by case. New York State is willing to work with you and see if this is something that we can really fight for your circumstances. So please get in touch with us. My email address I'll put in the chat there, but you can also reach us at very easily at inclusion@veterans.ny.gov. I'll put both my personal address and my and the inclusion address in the chat. We want to hear from you, because also even if you were put out on bad paper and you think, oh well, I don't know that restoration of honor is really going to change my life very much. I got discharged. I got put out on bad paper in the 80s. I've been living my life this long. I'm active with SAGE. I feel good. I don't need restoration of state benefits. That's not going to materially impact my life. Well, Well, I mean, we do want to be able to provide you with that piece of paper saying that your service was honorable for for our purposes here in New York State. We want to provide you with that dignity. We want to do that. We also want to be able to do that for you so that we can accrue, so that we can say in New York State, here's how many cases we restored honor to. It's kind of please stand up and be counted with us, so that we can address this, so that we can count you, so that we can tell not your personal story with your name on it, but to say, here's a situation where an injustice is done. Here's what we did in New York State to say that this service was indeed honorable, so that we can capture it and tell that story, not because we're so great, but because but to put pressure, like Ashton said, to show what success looks like, what's possible when a state says, here's what we're going to try to do here. And it's also a model for what hopefully the federal government can take on and do as well. Sometimes you have to paint a picture of what justice looks like or what something better looks like, so that so that the VA wants to grab our language and say, oh yeah, we're trying to do that too. Look how you think New York State is so great? Oh, look at us. And so allow us to make it a competition, so that everybody wants to do the right thing for you and people like you. So let us do that for you. Let us work with you on whatever your situation is. If you were done wrong, reach out to us, and we're going to do what we can for you. There's still all these rules in place, but we want to do what we can for you. And we want to take your case and say, here's a circumstance of injustice that needs to be righted. Because, whether it's with our all of our legal partners throughout the state, I saw, NYLAG is on here. I saw, Megan with NYLAG, all the great attorneys who want to be advocates for you. Not just to fix your particular situation, but to actually see justice done. So let us work with you, and let us know your story, so that we can factor that, so that we can use that in our advocacy to make things better.
It's a great question and a great response, Kristen. And I'm familiar with a case that's similar, and the angle that they're trying to appeal that decision is that there's a hardship here. This is a perfectly capable and able-bodied service member who was discharged because of discriminatory policies. And not only that, they were set up, they believe, by a purge that was put together and facilitated by the branch of service that they were involved with and enlisted in, which makes it beyond scandalous. But you destroy people's lives this way. People are dedicated. Almost everybody I've talked to in this program who has come to SAGE or I've met through DVS has been more dedicated, way more dedicated than I was when I served. And this is the kind of people I want fighting for my country. I want people that are dedicated to the United States of America, who are going to go out there and take good orders and fight for us, because that's what we need, is democracy for all. The Pledge of Allegiance is liberty and justice for all, united.
You're so right, Ashton. I mean, and these kind of policies, like this exclusionary policy that, that would put, these stories, you were targeted for going to a gay bar, you're targeted for all these everyday things. I mean, this is essentially, it was a policy of fratricide. It was harming the buddy next to you, or allowing them to harm you. The military, in any Army training I've ever been to, we go to great lengths. If you run a range, a firing range, a rifle range, you do everything you can to keep people from shooting each other. And we failed to do that when it came to discrimination and hate.
You're here. So moving forward, restoration of honor. We're going to inspire and lead the way for other states. We're going to put pressure on the federal government through our own stories and our own successes, helping out veterans. we're going to do everything we can to make a change with the transgender ban and make that end again. Because when it did end for those couple of years, we had an opportunity to see the transgender service members were so grateful to be themselves, and they were so dedicated. And then suddenly they weren't allowed to re-enlist, and they changed their minds again. And what a terrible idea. What about the safety of those individuals within the military at the time? Look at Fort Hood. These stories are atrocious, and it's all based on discrimination and hate. We can't let our military do this. We have to hold our leaders accountable, and we're going to continue to do so. So 2021 is coming. It's around the corner. Today's the anniversary of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, the repeal of it. And we are not celebrating, we are commemorating. And we thank you all so very much for being with us today. Any final words, final thoughts from our panel? Ken, you've been quiet for a while. Would you like to take the lead there?
So yeah, I would. Thank you. And I think you and I have talked about a few things. So Don't Ask, Don't Tell may be gone, but there are commanders, and there's still an environment, a very conservative environment, by the way, which all of us can understand, especially with the military. But with the proactive long-term engagement in war we have seen some great successes that you saw the people, experiences that I had with a boyfriend who was Navy, and his commander, we're on here and we're all good New Yorkers. He didn't give a shit. You do your job, I got your back. And we are seeing more and more of that coming out of a stressed force under combat for just such a prolonged period, but that doesn't make it go away. There are false allegations. This is not just a tie back to me, but in the advocacy work that I've been doing on my own and with some other groups, the idea of false allegations, look, they happen, but within the military, we're still seeing false allegations bringing up the old gay panic defenses. And those gay panic defenses are still being successful either in full general court martials or summary court martials, or even freaking Article 15 small, commander decisions. So there's a lot of work to be done. And I just don't want to forget that overall the environment has better. We are grateful for that, but we're still not there yet. I have my last piece of that is that what Don't Ask, Don't Tell did to so many of us is they took people who were an asset to the nation, and either through our discharge or through our incarceration and prosecution, they made us a burden on the society that we gave our lives to. And it's going to be events like this and people's willingness to come forward with Kristen's help, with Sage's help, or even people like Aaron who are going to get you hooked up with some pro bono. Reach out to us. Even I'm available individually. If you don't want to go to them, you just want to talk to an old veteran, Ashton will make that available. Ashton, I promise to do that. But that's what I want to leave the thought with, is that it's better. It's still not done. And there are people out here for you. So I'll leave it there. Thanks, Ashton.
Thank you, Ken. That was awesome. Lewis, you there? We are going to make this up to you, Lewis. We are, me and my comms team have already started the conversation. We're going to reach out to you and we're going to make this up to you. It was so important for him to be here today. He took a day off work. He's got an amazing story. It will be shared soon. SAGEVets has a quarterly newsletter. We always have a spotlight on a veteran, and we're going to talk to Lewis about some ideas we have here. Since we can't get final words from Lewis, Aaron, you got some final words for us today?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to thank Ken and Kristen for their service, and I think it's important to think about, on this day that we're commemorating, I should note, the law that authorized repeal, because it didn't go into effect, for some period of time, even after this. It was kind of unusual in that respect. But all the people who served in silence, all the people who, sacrificed so much under this completely unnecessary law, and to think about them today.
Kristen, it's on you. Final words.
Yeah, and thank you, Aaron, for reminding us that it was, I remember this day 10 years ago, I mean, like it was yesterday. I mean, I think that means just I'm getting old, you know, but it took another 9 months for it to go into effect. And like during that 9 months, you know, like what was the difference between, you know, the final day of Don't Ask, Don't Tell and the first day of it being repealed? Absolutely nothing. And I remember feeling just such a well of anger about that, that the policy forced us all into these situations at others' convenience, and it meant nothing. And it was only because it was the way it was, and they just wouldn't repeal it until they did. And you know, and I want to thank everybody who had a hand in that repeal, in defending the troops and telling the stories of those who couldn't speak, or they would be put out. All those who were discharged, who took the brave step of telling their stories, and you know, whether it was chaining themselves to the White House fence, or you know, or speaking at rallies, or simply just telling their stories for video, you know, or the veterans who aren't LGBT, who stood up and said this crap is wrong and it needs to change. And you know, Patrick Murphy was one of them. He was the first post 9/11 veteran who was elected to Congress, and he served in Iraq, and he saw what a wrong-headed policy, what a homicidal, mistaken policy this was, and he introduced the bill that ended up repealing this. And so I am always grateful to him, and to everybody who supported the repeal, even though it came so late for so many. You know, and over these 10 years, there seems to be kind of an erasure in many ways of how bad and how harmful these policies were, going back literally generations. You know, back to, you know, World War II and before, you know, like we talked about at the last event, World War I, you know, I mean, like this was just generational stuff that was wrong. And, you know, and so I encourage everybody who is able to, who is comfortable, who is ready, keep telling your story. Tell your story. Speak that truth. Make people hear you about what you experienced and the wrong that was done. Keep letting your elected officials know, because they're the ones who can keep making the change and keep pushing that forward. Keep reminding them of how hard it was. So, and keep pressure on your state government, as well as your federal government, to keep serving you and doing all that we can for you, to right those wrongs. It is on government to make the fixes. And so I say to you as a government official now, let us help you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kristen. And just to echo that, yes, your stories are so powerful, and they make people understand that they're not alone, who have have suffered similar situations. I can't tell you the number of times when I speak to a veteran for the first time and I say, you know, I've heard similar stories, and they're always so shocked. So it means a lot for you to be so courageous to be with us today. Louis, Ken, Aaron, Kristen, all of you are amazing. And yes, our champions in Albany, so grateful for your leadership in so many ways, especially the Restoration of Honor Act. The original bill sponsor, Senator Brad Hoylman, Assemblymember Dee Dee Barrett, Senator John Brooks. Can't thank you enough for standing behind this legislation. It was voted in support of, like unanimously at the state legislature. Just goes to show you that we've come such a long way since Don't Ask, Don't Tell, but there's still such a long way to go. So thank you all so very much for being with us today. We are going to have a great new year. We're going to have a great, powerful future, and we're going to do it together. So thank you again, and Happy New Year to you all, and wishing you the season's best.
Happy holidays. Happy New Year, everyone.
Thanks, Ashton.
You're welcome. My pleasure. Thank you all. Good night.